Let's try this, all right? Question, proposal, intro, preface, here we go. Exactly what is the revolution? Since that's what I'm calling it this year. And what would be some fair verbal description of the kind of day-by-day existence of a revolutionist, as I've been calling them for this year. Many of you thought you were calling it something else. Well, most of you never had anything to call it. You called it whatever book impressed you or whatever you heard about. But in between it sounding too strange, and in between the times it sounds like it's not even strange enough, what might it be up to? And I didn't really have any great preparation of what to do, but I trusted in the great fates and for Larry that if I started this, that something would arise. So let me try a few things. I'm doing this tonight based upon some recent, especially some letters and communiques I've gotten from people out of town and getting this on tape in other places. The people in the other cities now, fair numbers, percentage numbers that I have never even seen. They've never even seen me in person. It's only gotten this from the tapes. So some of these are sort of condensed, put together parallel wrap-ups in response to some of the kinds of inquiries, some of the observations that these newer people have made getting all this second-handedly. Well, how about one thing, to get right down to a good foundation to start with. A revolutionist knows, and it is not as simple a matter as he knows it because he read it, or she knows it because she was told it. It's a genetic lesson. Some people are born with funny-looking noses. Some people are born with artistic talent and this and that. Some people are born almost knowing this. And all it takes is a kind of trigger. All it takes is for them to find one of their distant relatives that they never knew they had. And something triggers it. It's as though they finally showed up for a family reunion. And they go in and perhaps they recognize a lot of people. There's a Christian idea, there's some metaphysical Islamic system they heard about, and there's old Uncle Charlie. You know, he was heavy into drugs and drink. All the things of which you would be genetically already familiar. And then it's as though you've talked around to some of the people and they say, well, everybody's here that you know about, everybody, your close relatives, even those that you may not have seen in a while. That is, you may have been 10 years since you've taken any drugs. But they're all there, and then you look around and you see somebody like me. And this is not a relative. You've never seen them, nobody seems to be talking, and there's the person, and it's as though you looked, and at first you thought, well, there's somebody maybe came to clean out the septic tank, or came to deliver some food. It's just somebody here. But then you look back, and it's like this. There's something familiar, and you don't know why, whether it's, is it Aunt Helen's, is it the way her chin kind of does? What is it? And you don't really know, except it strikes you, this son of a gun is related to me. They just know it out. Never heard of him, nobody seems to be talking to him, but that's Ken. So, a revolutionist knows stuff, but it's like it takes running across a surprising relative. And you go, ah. Now back to what I said is one of the foundations that I could ad-lib it in response to some of this for you. One of the things that a revolutionist knows, but remember what I've just said about knows. It's not book knowing. It's not even run-of-the-mill experiential knowing. And it's certainly not simply that somebody told him or her. You know it. Your genetic code knows it. Your genes know it when you hear it, when you see it, even when you're exposed to it at times, or just seeing something, a crowd of people, a certain person. You just know, But here is one for me to go from that level into the verbal level. Because what I'm attempting to do, or I plan to attempt to do in the next few minutes, if you hadn't figured out, is just give like a condensed version, some little short things of what this could actually be about, as opposed to what seems to be ordinary life. Well, one of these basic knowings that does not fit into a dictionary definition of knowing is the revolutionist knows that what everybody else believes to be correct is not. And, or but. He knows that the opposite is not true either. Now that cuts down on the possibility of a family reunion almost anywhere on this planet at any given time. Because you end up, you're related to me. No, you're not. Right? I like you. No, that's not important, but the opposite is not important either. Anything that everybody else believes to be true, the revolutionist knows is not correct. Now, life is arranged in such a way that for anybody in the city, you know this, for anybody in the city to stand up and say that they believe anything, they believe X, Y, Z, for them to be able to say that, then life has already got, standing by, right in the wings, for someone to stand up and say, you could not be more wrong if you tried. There's going to be something resembling an equal weight of people or peoples who deny the validity of X, Y, Z. So that is nothing. The full statement is that the revolutionist knows that what people in the city believe is not correct, comma, but, or, and, he knows that the opposite, whatever it is, that the opposite is not correct either. You have cut down your immediate family to a handful of people. You have cut down the close proximity that I refer to, that I know about, of a kind of genetic tributary, a kind of genetic short hair in life's nose that produces this sort of thing, and it's a small number of people that can recognize that, hey, not only is this not true, all this is not true. Not just a this or a that. All of this is and all of that's are not true, but, and, or and. The opposite is not true either. You're down to a very, very small group of people that might get on a hydrofoil with you. The rest of them came here that's going anywhere. They're not even sure that there is a vessel here, because if you're asked and if you responded, is it actually here? I don't see it. Does anybody see the difficulty? If you were still just giving the benefit that this person might be vaguely related, and therefore I will try not to mislead any more than humanly possible. So if they say, well, I don't actually see a vessel here, is there one here? All right, so here you are. They're asking, is it here or not here? And there they are. And that's almost, it's almost a certainty that they're not really that close to you. That they ask, is it actually here or not? Because even if it's not, the opposite is not true either. And if it is, as opposed to not being there, the opposite is not correct. So if all you got's a relative that says, are we having fresh vegetables today at the reunion or not? It doesn't matter anymore. They're not eating. They are not gourmets. Don't write me. Something else about the revolutionist. Is the revolutionist, and not simply limited by any means to any sort of very physical level, because this has almost nothing to do with that, but the revolutionist would be indifferent to almost everything else, more or less, that other people fear. I repeat one more time, not that he would attempt to stand on his head on top of a flagpole. Not that he would jump into the jaws of almost certain death. If it was labeled certain death and it had jaws, he would probably say, well, you know, after you, right? I've got to go somewhere, not today. That, in our day and time, of course, is not the widest swath in which resides human fears. It's not that. It's not just the fear of being mugged or the fear of a car wreck or the fear that you're going to die of some horrible, disfiguring disease. Or some of you are such that they can actually tell that the disease has disfigured you, which is another story. But the fears that people have in the city, think about it. The fears, what are the human fears? What do you fear when you're back at city level? Nothing. Those fears, the revolutionist is indifferent to. But, to keep the sentence balanced, that which he perhaps would be most uneasy about, rather than say fear, would be a kind of supreme boredom. But you would do well to stay with a better word than fear, even balancing the sentence, a kind of uneasiness, because it's not a fear. If there's anything that frightens people in the city, if there's anything that frightens you, disturbs you at line level, at the ordinary level of what you were and what you are on a bad day now, then you can be assured, without any doubt, without any verbal doubt, that the correct response, the correct nameable response would be indifference. Not denunciation of it, not criticism of it, not how can you people care what people think of the way you dress in the city. If somebody doesn't have anything to do with your job. How in the world, how can you explain there's a guy out here jogging at 5 in the morning with his white, snow white socks pulled all the way up, nearly to his knees, and his little shorts, obviously pressed recently by his wife with little creases in them. How can you do that? What a waste of time. What are you afraid of? If you find it upsetting at all, then you're afraid of it yourself. And there's no room for criticism. There's no room for any question as to what other people fear, because you have your own similar fears, but you would then be indifferent to anything other than that which might represent impending immediate physical danger. Indifferent. Not mad at it, not resisting it, indifferent to it. How about some quick ones? Maybe I'll go back and unquick them in a minute. A revolutionist might get sick, but he wouldn't suffer. A revolutionist might get cheated, but he wouldn't get taken. A revolutionist could be temporarily dominated, but he wouldn't get beaten. A revolutionist could get tired, but he would not get disgusted. He could get anxious, but he wouldn't get desperate. And he would probably, that's poetic when I say stuff like probably, he would forget things that other people remember, that other people seriously remember, and then he would recall many other things that ordinary people never even noticed in the first place. So any of those worth going back and unquickening. You can get sick. That's not permission. If you recall from night before last, I believe it was the man Kyroots that asked the musical question of how would you actually know when a pull leg muscle was too sore to go out and do your day to run? I'm not sure all of you heard it. Sometimes maybe he doesn't write them correctly. But the way that a revolutionist would tell would be that his brain muscle, his muscle of consciousness, would almost be as sore over the simple fact that he'd pulled his leg muscle. Not just some childish way like, well, I'm I regret that I can't go out and run. It's not like that. It's getting into some of the aggression I've talked about that is foreign to the human tongue. It's like being mad. It's controlled aggression, though, that I could pull a muscle. Everybody's pulled a muscle. I guess everybody's hurt their ankle, their knee. But if you don't know, when is it too sore? You don't have to call a doctor. You don't have to dance around all morning. You don't have to have somebody keep looking. You don't have to measure it with a tape to see if it's gone down 2 silly millimeters since last night. If you're so mad that your ankle got turned, and I don't know who we're going to blame it on. Notice the way I put it, your ankle got turned yesterday. Maybe a Midas shop did it, but somebody turned your ankle. And now you're wondering, is it too sore to run? If the part that is perceptive to sore muscles and has the words, if it is almost as sore as that is, over the fact that this has been done, you can probably take the morning off. Because you may, in such a whirlwind of peak controlled aggression, it is quite likely, it's not impossible, that you will trip and turn your other ankle. And then really have the big M's. And what was my second one? The real revolutionists could get cheated, but it wouldn't get used. I don't know if that's important to talk to you people much anymore. It is simply such things as getting sick. It's not dissimilar to that, or turning your ankle. Is there some idea that there's some way to live an absolutely perfected life without, that is, staying on the couch forever and having people wait on you? That is, never turn your ankle, never pull a muscle, never apparently get, and as always, cheated is an ad hoc term to us. Put it in quotation marks if you want. But if you're going to go out and play in life, then somewhere along the line, there can be somebody, as you would call it, inadvertently shortchanging you at Kmart. And it could be all the way from that to you actually getting in some sort of passing business deal, or somebody with a very sincere face and a nice mustache offering to sell you some land that just came available, not far from Stanahatchee. The land just came available. That's kind of a term they seem to have, that it just kind of came available. Things like that can happen, and you do not necessarily have to be looking to take somebody else to be taken, to simply get in the city, at the city level, cheated. That's no excuse like being sick. I'm not giving you permission now to go out and turn your ankle, or to go out and say, well, I have always wanted to put all the money I had in sweet potato futures, and I just knew I'd lose it all, but since you said that, hell, I'll go do it tomorrow, and I will lose it all. The thing is, you cannot go through life, and I'm sure that all of you, something has happened in the past, feeling as though I got took once. Because if you've been alive, and you have been off the couch and out of your house a few times before you got here, somewhere there is in your memory, I got took. And you probably remember the circumstances you think very well, the way the guy smiled, the way he said, trust me. You remember it all. And how you trusted him. You can get cheated in life at the city level. At the city level, you can get cheated in life, but a real revolutionist does not get used. And to get used, what I mean, the difference between that and cheated, to get used, you got to what? You got to remember it. Then you're getting used. Well, when did this guy cheat you? Well, let's see, it was late 79, well, no, it was 80. 8 years ago, eh? Yeah, but it's just like yesterday. You've been used. Not by the guy that cheated you. You've been used. And I said that a real revolutionist could be temporarily dominated, which is, I know none of you laughed when I said it, but that's hilarious. I love the way I can destroy even the King's English at times, as though you had any choice. If you're alive, you get temporarily dominated. You're dominated for many years by your mother and father. You can be dominated now. Just start to step out in the street and you look up and you see a blue uniform. And you know if they're now beginning to enforce jaywalking ordinances in your city. And the guy goes, and you go. And you step right back. You've been dominated. You're dominated when you fill out your income tax and you think, what if I took off that trip me and old what's-her-name took down to the Cayman Islands, and I said that that was a body and fender seminar that I had to go to. And then suddenly dreams, the last time just a few nights ago on some TV show, there was an assistant in the IRS, and him talking about the number of cases we're making on your average Joe citizen now. And you think, no, I'm going to try that. You've been dominated. You dance backwards there for a second. It's impossible to be alive without being temporarily dominated. In life, temporary domination is like the two-step. This average person is dominated, and then they may be out of it for a little while, a few minutes, a few hours, and then they're back in it. So it is really foolish, ultimately, in the same way you say it's foolish to if you ever believe that somebody, if they had some kind of extraordinary knowledge, they'd never get sick. I almost agree with that you shouldn't, but you got to look at it this way. They're going to get the big sickness, no matter who they are. They're going to get the big S. They're going to drop just like you did, or are. In the same way, if you're going to be alive and get out of the house, you're going to get apparently cheated. If you're going to get out of the house, of course, to be dominated, you can stay home. The phone can ring, you pick it up, and they say, this is the IRS, and you go, oh my God. And you're dancing backwards just as fast as you can. Or you just pick up the phone, this is your mother, why didn't you call me? So you can be dominated, but a revolutionist would not get beaten. Not to be beaten by it to begin with. Several ways I can describe it. To begin with, those of you who can hear good, you got to struggle with the dance. Now, if you're in a position that you're being dominated, all but the most naive of those that know anything believe that in the midst of a dance it is easy to reverse it. It's not impossible. In fact, one of the excursions I've given almost everybody over the last few years, there's a way that you can reverse the kind of energy flowing between you and another person in a situation. But once the dance is going, the way life normally operates, any idea that I'm suddenly going to permanently, just right now, reverse this dance between me and the IRS, if there's some trick I can do that suddenly the IRS as a city institution is going to go, uh-oh. Leave that guy alone. That guy, he's going to do us all in. He's going to bring down the whole temple. So it's not that, but a real revolutionist would not get beaten. And if you're going to wrestle with a dance, like, they can't do this to me. Sure they can. To believe, well, I'm not going to let my family do this. The IRS, the government. They can't do this to me. Did they do it to you? Yeah, but they can't. Case closed. No. They can't do this to me. You're beat. As long as you believe that they can't do this to you, you're simply, to go back to my metaphor of the dance, you are simply now, and you can be a 6'3", 200-pound man, but you are now dressed up in drag, and you're dancing backwards as fast as you can, and in a little whiny voice, you're saying, you can't do this to me. And you can say that the rest of your life. And the question is, can't you see it's too late? You are beaten if you wrestle with the dance. You are beaten if you wrestle with temporary, passing domination of any kind. Because you believe that there is an opposite step that would be freedom. Did anybody like that Kyroot tonight? Not many of you laughed. Not near enough of you. The Kyroot gave a definition, in a sense, that the ordinary city concept of human freedom is perhaps life's supreme piece of sarcasm. I hate to say that about life, but there is no other word. It really goes in a little secret hole that I can't describe to you people. It's not ordinary sarcasm, and it's not really good-natured humor. It's not. But it's over in an unknown four-dimensional area. But I guess I could censor some of what I bring in from Kyroots, so I let him go ahead and say that because I knew what he meant. But it is, from one real view, it is like a supreme piece of sarcasm. Because humanity, as long as you got any yellow circuit history, writing, thinking, is the great debate about human freedom. Not the question, is there such? No. It's the debate about how much do we have, how much more can we get, how might we lose it? And that's a kind of supreme piece of sarcasm. But there is no freedom if you're wrestling. If you're wrestling with what seems to be a piece of domination, a dance, then you believe that whatever you're finding now unacceptable, disturbing, being dominated, that it has a flip side, that it has a reverse, it has an opposite. The revolutionist knows that nothing has an opposite. The opposite is not correct. If everyone else says it is not good to be dominated by an unkind person or an unkind institution. Remember how I opened up this little gig tonight. The revolutionist knows that what everybody else believes is wrong, comma, but, or and, he knows that the opposite is likewise incorrect. And so if somebody says it is not good to be dominated by an unkind person, are you going to wait for a revolutionist, your own consciousness, to go, yeah? Because if you say yeah, then that means that the opposite is correct. I mean, it's not. You are beaten. You're not only dominated, but you are beaten. You're going to be dragged around like a cheap tango dancer, like the Apache dance. Not just a tango. Whoever's dominating you finally is going to pick you up, if you don't know what the Apache dance is, and a good tango, and they're going to mop the floor with you. They're going to throw you around, and the real Apache dance, of course, on stage is all this fake hostility from the man to the woman. Except life don't fake, if you never notice that. If life starts to hit you, it does not pull punches. And life does not hit you with spun glass breakaway bottles. If whatever it is, life, if it's the IRS, your mother, somebody that you tried to cheat in a business deal, and they start doing that dance to you, they're going to mop the floor with you. You're beaten. Now, of course, I don't mean that that's limited to physical. If you struggle with the dance, if you struggle with passing temporary dominance on the basis that, let's say, at least 50% of the world's population, don't worry, it's just to try to keep you flowing along here, that let's say that at least 50% of the population at any time says, ooh, I'm being danced backwards and I don't like it. I'm being pushed around by some government agency, by some family member, by some friends. I'm being pushed around and I don't like it. The revolutionist, if he is outside the house, if he is in life at all, which all of you should be, there's no reason to be hermits yet. Plus none of you can afford it correctly. A cheap hermit doesn't count. If that was acceptable, I'm way off the subject, if that was acceptable, we would all be hermits, if you wanted to, on me. The kind of islands I find that I can afford to invite all you people here, it's land that has just been recently discovered not far from Stanahatchee. As it turns out, the government will not, you can own it, but you can't do anything with it. You can't walk on it. It's a long story, but you can't be a cheap hermit. So none of you got any need to even concern yourself about being a hermit. So you're going to get dominated. But if you had a kind of four-dimensional consciousness, you would know this. This dance right now, this phone call from the IRS, this thing from my mother, or me suddenly seeing that guy that cheated me years ago drive by, and all day long my stomach's been like that, and all day long I've been thinking about how can I get revenge, how come I couldn't get all this tag number. You're being danced backwards, and it's like the end of the world is here, or a real serious dance step. If you had 4D consciousness, and you knew how to be that kind of, it's not true, but a kind of sarcastic attitude toward yourself, forget life doing it to you, your attitude would be something like this: hey, what's new? That at the ordinary level, again, just to give you a rough idea, in any given situation, 50% of the people on the planet, 50% of the time, are being dominated. So a real revolutionist has got no, absolutely useless, don't make me search for a strange synonym, it's just useless for him to search about why am I being dominated. You're alive. You're out of the house. You're off the couch. You're just a fairly functioning human being. You just decided you wanted to go down to the store and get a loaf of bread so you wouldn't starve to death. And somewhere between here and the corner, you got dominated. Somebody could have just drove by. I remember my old guys in the pickup truck, they're still around. They just drove by and holler, "Fuck you!" And you dance backwards. And you can get used. You can get beaten. 2 hours later, you can be sitting home and they're still beating up on you. You would know that 50% of the people in the city, 50% of the time, are getting beat up on. They're being dominated. It has to be. Now, some of you, a year or more ago, I'm sure didn't particularly like my terms when I talked about the dominant-submissive dynamic or the dominant-submissive dance. Even though I told you it was nothing negative, I was fully aware of the connotations that it would bring about. I could have called it something else. I could have called it the up and down dynamic, the purple and green dynamic. But in truth, there is no judgment involved. There is no right and wrong. And I haven't laid on this a lot because it is very potent. It is getting close to real gunfire that all of you can see in a certain way that a good 90%, I'm going to write that down, a good 90% of that which just seems to be inexplicable in human relationships, you can see through a new stereoscopic vision of simply seeing it. Everything from love to hate. Is that in every relationship, if you've got two people and they do any more than pass 2 to 5 seconds, like, do you know where Broad Street is? And this other person says, yeah, it's 2 blocks down, thanks. If it gets past that point, and even I could show you in there, I could show you a dominant and submissive, because you had to submit if you accept it. If he seemed dominant enough and you said, which way is Broad Street? And the guy went, Broad Street. Well, I think it's. There may not be a dance coming up. But if you say, which way is Broad Street? And you want to go to Broad Street, whatever reason, you got to be there. You're late now. He says, Broad Street? Well, it's 2 blocks down that way. You can't miss it. Thanks. You had just a second to dance, and this guy seemed that he was real prepared. Mr. Macho. He jumped right up and he grabbed you, be you male or female, and he said, sure. It's 2 blocks down, you can't miss it. And you were delighted, but you were delighted. Because by all the feel you got, that guy knew what he was doing. The way he stepped there for 2 times, 2 blocks down, you were delighted. You didn't feel like, well, I'm some kind of fruit cake that I'm letting somebody dance me backwards. You wanted to be danced back. You wanted to be dominated. You wanted energy. You think of it as information, same thing. You wanted information that you needed. But to get it, you had to submit. Do you know where it is? And the guy said, sure I do. Will you tell me? Yes, 2 blocks down, you can't miss it. Thanks. But what I was going to say, I like the way I can skewer my own examples. It's not me. That's why I keep telling you people, any example, life is talking to you all the time. That's one of the ways I get off on these side courses. I've never pointed this out in words, is I can point out, trying to make a point using the language which is based on opposites. I can say, well, so-and-so is true except for this kind of, exception. There would seem to be to you an exception. And I'll start to go on and I'll realize, well, some of you might be sharp enough for me to show that the exception ain't no exception. Because all I got to do is stick my hand down the throat of an exception and pull it like this, and you got inside out, and it's no longer an exception. Of course, then you're left with perhaps another Kyroot coming up. Somebody remind me that there are no exceptions. They're just not. But if it's not just a situation that apparently is almost nothing took place, like you're just walking down the street and you and another guy, you're not looking and you almost hit each other, and both of you just realize at the same moment, both of you go, oh, sorry. Almost something like that, and you go on. That neither one of you went, watch it. Other than just these little things that are absolutely passing. I'm talking about passing, just seconds. Other than that, if the relationship's going on for a few minutes at all, you're sitting down at the counter and ordering food, there is a dominant, submissive relationship. Love is the relationship between people, families, all business, religion, entertainment. When you go to be entertained, you pay money to be dominated. And if you're not dominated, you never use these terms, if you're not dominated that suits you, you leave complaining. They explain it other ways. Amateurs, they knew what they were doing. It was an off night. I always heard he was better than that. What you heard was, perhaps that night to you, what you'd heard was this guy, when he storms the stage of this group, They own it. For the next 4 or 5 hours, they own the stage. You're talking about domination. What many people refer to, many people to say the least, of relationships breaking down, that I don't know, it's like we grew tired of each other. We fell out of love. We fell in love, and then we fell out of love. A love relationship, I don't care what it is, I don't care how it seems to you, there is a dominant over a long span. You have to have kind of 4D consciousness. Well, all of you should be able to see the easy part, that there is a dominant and a submissive figure. And historically, throughout the world, and now things are gradually changing, is how this idea, more or less, of feminism, to get off on another track, but up till now it has been in all relationships, just as a rule. All of you know this, the male was the dominant, and the female was the submissive. There's a gradual change taking place, and I wasn't going to stop there to go into anything particular, except in every relationship. And it's not just sexual. If you got two friends, two guys, again, this is kind of changing because women did not have that kind of, or even friendship enough to relate toward men, and men seem to be the pack animals that were hanging out together, didn't have anything to do with overt sex, just guys being buddies. But women should have noticed this, and men should, if I can point out. You got a bowling team, 5 or 6 guys. You can look in the middle of it and see the dominant ones. You can sure as hell do it if you got any kind of eyesight with a pack of wolves or a pack of dogs, and you can sit with men. You can sit with 2 guys. They get together 2 or 3 times a week, or every day after work, they stop and have a couple of drinks. One of them is dominant and one of them is submissive. That's the only way it's satisfying in the 3D world. There's nothing wrong with it. Only an idiot, if they ever heard about it. Only somebody way outside the bell curve would try and complain about this. Even the people involved. If I was this foolish to try and make some point, and I grabbed these 2 ordinary guys and I said, all right, you're the submissive one. It wouldn't mean shit. I'd say, you're best friends, but he's the dominant one. And you're the submissive. It's just meaningless. Unless they thought I was trying to make some kind of theoretical personal attack on them. Maybe the question is manhood or something. But the thing is, the people find, if it's a friendship, they find it enjoyable. People find love when they're in love enjoyable. But in every instance, you ought to be able to see this, I shouldn't have to go any further, at least at that level, there is always a dance going on. There is always a, well established, you can see it, that one of the parties is dominant and one is submissive. It's just glaring as hell. No doubt about it. The revolutionist knows that there is a temporary, that there is a passing dynamic in which he is going to be continually dominated. It may be for a couple of seconds, it may be for a couple of minutes, it may be longer. To go in and get root canal work, you got to dance backwards. You got to turn yourself over to somebody, to believe that you're going into a priest, to believe that you're going to a psychiatrist and get help. You have to turn yourself into a submissive person, or else you're an idiot. It'd be like going in and say that you hardly know anything about automotive repairs, and they go in and the guy says, I'll fix your car, it's $200, and then you stand there and while knowing almost nothing, and you keep saying, no, don't touch that, don't do that, no. Bang on this thing over here, whatever that is. You have got to submit. It is not evil, it's not good or bad. But if you wrestle with it, if you become entangled like everybody else does, even without knowing my terms, they get entangled in the city, that's part of the dynamic. There's people saying, I do not want to be dominated, if they use my terms. But you got to remember what I tried to point out to you several nights ago. Ordinary consciousness will not expand to such a degree for people to find out that their life, their hobby, whatever it is, also encompasses their complaint. Ordinary consciousness cannot go that far. You have stretched it and it's going to come apart. It'll snap right back to tell somebody, all right, you are a submissive person. You're one of the greatest examples of a submissive person. You are a living example of what I've been talking about. The person will go, oh, no. God, I hate that. I think I know what you're talking about. And geez, I hate it. I try not to be, etc. They're vocalizing about some aspect of their life. Even an accusation that this is the focal point, the central point of your life. And they say, it's not. That is part of it. And once you get a glimpse, there's no kind of great message, there's no great secret here. I didn't have to go to Tibet to get that. Well, Well, do you know where cat meant? Well, never mind. And you see it, but consciousness will not stretch that far. It's like simply telling somebody, you are accident prone. No, I'm not. I don't like this. I guess I'm clumsy. I'm clumsy, but I'm not accident prone. That's part of it. The denial, as you call it, the denial is nothing. It's sound waves. It's part of that person's dynamic. It's part of that person's energy responsibility. It's not only to hurt themselves, but to deny that they do. It's not psychosomatic. It's not unconscious. It's not subconscious self-inflicted wounds. You can call it that. If you got nothing else to do, then that's your hobby. That you talk like that. You believe like that. So there can be people that would feel like they're submissive and say they don't like it. That's fighting against it. There can be people that you can say, all right, you're dominant. You won't even put up, you can't deal with any situation, even socially, unless you are dominant. The person goes, so what? You know, what's it to you? Maybe it is. All right, they could, to push the example the way I was going, I guess it would be easier for some of you maybe to get a glimpse of, they can say, I guess you're right. You're not the first person to tell me how pushy I am. I guess I should take non-assertive training, if they have it. Or they could say, yeah, I'm too vain. I pray about it. I've tried to calm down. But that's part of it. They too would be struggling. They too would be struggling against the dance. All right. The revolutionist knows not to get entangled with temporary, with passing positions of him being dominated, because if he does, you're beaten. And even a revolutionist, if he gets out of the house, she gets out of the house, is going to undergo continual, temporary domination. But the real revolutionist would not be beaten. To be in a dance, to be in a situation that you're dominated for some length of time. There's no more than to say it rained. And as smart as I am, as enlightened as I am, why the hell does it rain on me? It rains on dumb people. It rains on people to whom I am much superior. Why does it rain on me? It's that kind of foolishness. And I said that a revolutionist could get tired but not disgusted, and he could be anxious and not desperate. Let's see if that's where they're backing up into. Nah, you understand all that. You'll be tired, but you would not get disgusted, which is a form of criticism. It's a form of giving up, is a form of giving up to a useless battle. And you could be anxious, which many of you feel like you are anxious, that you wish things would go faster for you personally in here, or you wish that things would go as fast all the time as it goes some of the time. And you can be anxious, that I sure would. Because one time I asked somebody here a real dirty question. I've never done that, but since I already asked one person, maybe I should ask all of you. Plus it might help the one person, because they enjoyed it so much they never let me forget it. Don't write me. Gourmet. One night, I told one of the people here that have been around a long time, anyway, sometimes I'll mention things to a few of you, and I said to this person, and we're in another crack, it's not fully rhetorical, and the person knew it, but I didn't go any further. I just said, what would you give to know what I know? And the person never let me forget it. So now maybe it'll help that person, but I thought maybe some of you might like this. What would you give to know what I know? Which insinuates a whole lot. And I don't mean just that I know a lot, because I'm not insinuating that. But the rest of it. All right, you could be anxious, but a revolutionist would never be desperate. Now, I'm still using English words, ordinary words, and I sure do mean a whole lot more and a whole lot less. Because what's lacking, of course, is the third leg. Desperate is the opposite of something. Well, it's obviously the opposite of non-desperate. And if I said, well, you could be anxious, then that's obviously the opposite of being calm, peaceful, non-excited, non-anxious. And neither of those, none of the terms I've mentioned, none of the apparent human emotions, nor their opposite, are correct for a revolutionist. for the revolution because they're useless. Neither one moves you any further than you are now. They will not produce any new energy. They will not get you non-tired. So you can't get desperate. Desperate is to be fighting whatever's going on, such as a temporary little step of you being dominated. To be desperate, you've got to feel like that these are desperate times. And the revolutionist knows these are not desperate times. Only the revolutionist actually knows that these are times. Everybody else thinks these are episodes. These are bits and pieces of my life. No, it's just time. It's just this big old picture that goes on for about 70 years, and you're just kind of, no. No, you're talking some kind of philosophical shit. You don't know what happened to me. You don't know what somebody just did to me. Sure I do. Sure I do. No, you don't. You couldn't. You couldn't. It was a foreigner. It happened to me in a foreign place. I don't care. You cannot be desperate. And if you're fighting what seems to be any city occurrence, people being stupid, people criticizing you, somebody or some organization, some idea apparently dominating you, if you're going to fight it, you feel desperate. A real revolutionist could be anxious. And if that's too strong, could be sincerely interested. But a revolutionist would never be desperate. And I was trying to put that really to a positive, or from a positive view, to say that he would not be desperate necessarily, that I'm not doing enough right now. Look at it, since all humans are going to anyway, in more of a negative manner. That in just quite mundane affairs, a revolutionist would not be desperate. Hey, God, I'm almost 40. For some of you men, which is not a cultural desperation, it's hormonal. And for you women, or hey, I'm losing all my hair, or hey, I'm losing all my money, hey, I'm losing all my friends. Well, all right. But Jesus, don't be desperate. It's not desperate times yet. Well, geez, I'm almost 40 and getting a little upset somewhere inside my little jeans, but I feel like I've wasted most of my life. As long as you can say I've wasted most of my life, it's not desperate time yet. I mean, it's only desperation time if you want to push them that far, as some of you already guessed. When you're right up against that wall, and when you know how to read it, it's an invisible clock, but what it says is your time is out. Now, if you want to look at it as having some moment of desperation, just find that there are exceptions to everything I say, even though they're not, that would be the exception. But as long as you can say, well, I feel desperate because I've wasted most of my life. Well, all right, I've wasted my life up until now. Well, so there's no reason to be desperate. Everybody's wasted their life up until now, no matter who they are and whenever they said it. If they said, I've wasted my life up till now, it's a fact, Jack. They wouldn't have said it. They feel it. That is their hormones. That is their molecules serving life. And if they say, up until now, I've wasted my life, what are you going to do with the truth, even in the city? Pat them on the head and say, there. I assume, tonight I want to keep this straight, I assume that none of you have tried to go off on some little spree of your own and tried to take any of this like it could apply just to one person internally. Now, we're not talking about that kind of stuff tonight. So many people on tape, you don't understand the strange culture in which I have ended up living. I thought I'd been familiar in some parts of the world with all kinds of some of the obscene. I get gestures here when I look around the people running this equipment, what do you call it, taping and stuff, and they do things like. I go home and I think, I know what one means. I even know what two means. Those of you not Italian, check with a friend. But when somebody goes, and I'm just sure that it's some kind of supreme insult, and I'm just too dense to know about it. Well, we'll check into that while we turn the tape over.